Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are tuned to the Nighttime Podcast, focused on the fringe of Canada.
Welcome back to a planned two-part series covering the murder of Tess Richey. In the last episode, we were joined by Karen Lieberman, a Toronto-based journalist with Global News. During our time with Karen, she shared her experiences reporting on both Tess's senseless murder and the trial against her killer, Kaylin Schlater. But tonight, we're going to get even closer to this heartbreaking story. As we heard Karen describe, this story heavily features a band of Richey women who've been steadfast in their support of Tess throughout every tragic twist and turn. Tess, the youngest of 5 sisters, had each one of them rallying around her and her mother Christine as they were pulled through every family's worst nightmare. Starting with the search for Tess, into the search for her killer, and throughout the entire trial, the Richey women have stood shoulder to shoulder wearing Tess's beads and demanding justice. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we're going to be given an inside look at this tragedy by someone who's living through it. Our guest is Tess's eldest sister, Varina Richey, and our topic, the murder of her sister, Tessie. Varina, I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment, but I want to set it up like this: is my Twitter account. I think I follow 200 or 300 people. And they're from all walks of life. So I have, journalists, TV personalities, UFO investigators, paranormal ghost hunters. But of the whole group, I think you're easily among the most entertaining on there. It's your Twitter account. It's almost like its own genre. There's like a bit of fashion. There's some live PD, and then there's just some like downright drama that I don't understand it, but I find it fascinating to watch it play out. So why don't you just tell us a bit about who Varina Richey is? So introduce yourself.
Well, I'm certainly, I guess, I'm not very good at these kinds of things, but I'm not a shrinking violet, I suppose. And I think that came out a lot with my sister at trial. We are very, even my mom, we're a very assertive family. We aren't afraid to say no. We're not really afraid if people don't like us. So, and I think that same quality sort of is prevalent throughout my family, throughout all of my sisters and my mom. And so I might be the more vocal of it, but it's definitely a characteristic we all share.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a bit about you. Tell me a bit about your life without getting too deep into it.
Yeah. I think I was, as the oldest sister. Funny enough, I think I was much more like the youngest sister than anyone. I don't have children. I like a nightlife. I like city life. I wanted to travel. I wanted the freedoms to travel. And I did enjoy that until this tragedy happened. So, I based myself in London. If I had an idea, if I dream, I went for it. Whether it was visiting a country I never thought I'd be able to visit, or, taking on a course that I never thought I could complete, or that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to take. So, I was somebody that sort of lived life a little bit differently than maybe the rest of society has chosen to live.
Yeah. And now a lot of people listening are acquainted with you mainly due to your connection with this tragedy that surrounding your sister, Tess. Mm-hmm. How does it feel to be known in that context? Like, so many people would meet you and know you through the context of this is Tess Richey's sister. Like, does that ever feel normal for you?
It makes me feel very proud, more proud than I ever thought. I mean, I was always proud of my sisters. I was always proud of being from a family of women. But, I'm devastated, obviously, that it's this way that, she made her mark on the world. That this has happened to any of my sisters and in my family and myself, that this has happened to our family, but to be associated with her in any way, I'm so proud. I mean, whether it's this in life and in death, I would never obviously ever predicted this or chosen this, but I'm proud to be hopefully one of her voices.
You've already mentioned your mom and Tessa's sisters, and I
Hmm.
think almost every article written about the trial or about Tessa's life will go on to explain how she has so many sisters and she's so close with her mom. Tell me a bit
Hmm.
about your family and kind of the environment Tess was brought up in.
Okay. Yeah. So in fairness, there's a 14-year age difference between Tess and I. So, as I turned 18, 19, she was 4 or 5. So I wasn't always around, but and I'm not going to speak for my sisters. I certainly can describe our household, which was chaotic,
Mhm.
colorful.
Five
Yeah.
sisters that's a lot of
Yeah.
Richie in one house, I imagine.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And we were, thankfully, we had a fairly free childhood. We were allowed to wear makeup and dress up and dabble in things at very young ages. Experiment with our hair. And, Tess was a very fashion conscious girl. She had style. She loved going to, used clothing stores. She loved pearls. We always wore her pearls for her. And at the trial, that was our way of symbolizing her. She was very feminine, and we were allowed to, explore our styles and do that. So it was a fairly free childhood, and I'm really, happy about that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the age difference between you and Tess. Like,
Hmm.
what kind of relation as you both got older? What kind of relationship did you have? Because I know just seeing from there's a video that I often see of, I think it's like your profile on maybe on Facebook or something where you're both
Hmm.
doing shots together.
I just found that a couple of weeks. I didn't even know I had it. Actually, I didn't even know I had that. I was sorting through some videos because lockdown and everything. I can't go visit my friends or do anything while I'm already transplanted in Toronto for this trial because I'm kind of stuck here now. So, just yeah, I was going through that. I honestly, I could have done better. I didn't always stop to see my sisters, kind of everywhere, the Toronto, and I would sometimes just go straight up to Cochrane or somewhere. And I didn't always, as they became adults, I didn't always, I thought I had more time. She's 22, but I was here. I'll be honest, I was here all summer before she passed away, and I didn't see her that summer. So I'm the first to admit that, I guess I could have, as a sister, done much better in that department. Not beating myself, like it is one of those things. I couldn't have ever predicted this, but definitely, definitely that was something I could have done better.
Yeah, I can't even. Well, I shouldn't say I can imagine, but I can't imagine
Yeah,
what
but
that
you
would
can
feel
put,
like.
I'm sure you can sort of put yourself in my shoes in that sense, to
Well,
have somebody so tragically ripped away and knowing that I was in the same country, same province, and I didn't see her that summer. So, that it will always break my heart because I know that I could have been a better sister or made more of an effort or reached out a little bit more. I mean, we weren't on the outs or anything. We talked and we spoke and we were close, but we weren't super close. And I I wish I would have seen her more. It's maybe it'll help me. I hope it'll encourage somebody else to maybe make the effort if they're on the outs with someone, or maybe not as in touch as they could, to just pick up the phone and send a text even. So maybe that can be something that comes from.
you had mentioned that for you, home was back in the UK, and
Mhm.
that's where you were living at the time that this occurred. Do you recall how and when you first learned that Tess was
Yeah.
missing? Can you tell me about that?
My sister Haley called me. I was just getting into bed. It was later in the day, obviously in England. They noticed that she was missing Saturday. They had been in contact with the police, and it was getting serious. So my mom got my sister Haley to call me. And Haley called me and answered the phone, and she was like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Good." Long time, I had just graduated from university 10 days earlier, so I thought, calling to wish me good luck on the job, or because it was supposed to start the next day because it was Sunday. And she just said, I can't find Tessie. And I knew immediately that she wasn't joking, because my sisters have never pulled any, out of all my I have four younger sisters. Nobody's ever pulled a stunt where we couldn't find them, even after a big night out. That's never happened. And I knew that it had to be pretty serious. And I hung up on her. I was really angry at her, because I was like, well, this better be serious if you're calling to tell me this. It was not like, it was just, I don't know. It was just, I was scared, I guess, because my sisters don't do that. And I could tell in her voice that they were scared. And I immediately started calling my cousins. I called them and I said, this is going on. What do you think? And they said, well, my cousin's older than me. And she said, when we were younger, we were 22 and it's her birthday weekend. And just anything, right? Could be anything. But it was when I saw the official police release on Twitter, and I had to make a post on Facebook asking my friends to help find my sister, that I really, really was frightened.
And it's like those initial kind of posts you mentioned, the police making on Twitter. I think I found out about it right around that same time. I remember in the news, even here in Nova Scotia, I remember seeing Tessa's photo with just like a brief summary. And yeah, I don't know why. I just clearly remember it. And I don't know if it was because of her picture. Like there's the picture that was used that was taken earlier on that day of her kind of sitting in the leaves or something.
Yeah, in the leaves. Yeah.
But what struck me about it was it just seemed like she had been missing for about a day, but it seemed very serious. And
yes.
And I could tell that whatever was going on was way out of the ordinary. Like, was that the mood within like amongst your family? Is that, there was no way that this was...
Oh yeah. Like I'd never, when my mom knew me, like we were FaceTiming, and my mom was like, no, like she was still in North Bay at this point. Like, I don't know if she knew Tess was gone, but she knew it was bad. Like, I could tell her. She was like, no, Varina. I'm like, Mom, just calm down. I'm like, she's probably had too much to drink, doesn't have a charger. Maybe met a guy, staying over at his house. Like, God knows, she's 22. It just can't be that out, But she was, I knew. I could tell by how she was reacting that it wasn't good at all.
And that was pretty universal amongst everybody involved. Like,
yeah, we panicked. We didn't waste any time. We didn't sit around and wait for the authorities to tell us something. My sister Rachel was already going and knocking on the neighbor's door. The person, Michelle, the witness, the person that my sister was chatting with outside her house, just around the corner from where she was found, who was very helpful, but didn't know what happened to her beyond when she had last seen her. I immediately went to Facebook. My friends started sharing the posts. I had friends that knew that I was in England, and my friends were amazing, printing posters. They were putting, we just didn't wait around. We just jumped right into it. I remember like emailing the press, tweeting the press. My sisters, like, they were out handing posters. They went to Toronto. They were physically looking for her in the neighborhood with my mom. We had friends that had friends that worked at the border. We had them looking. We had friends that did documentaries in human trafficking, and we had them use some of their resources. Like we pulled out every connection we could find. We used every social media tool we could.
Wow.
Anything we could think of. So
and it seems like we don't need to get deep into this side of it, but a lot of criticism has been directed towards the local police, mentioning and referring to
rightfully
the fact and referring to the fact that it was mainly Tessa's loved ones that were leading the search and ultimately were the ones successful in finding her. That's still playing out. Like, police officers were actually charged for the handling of this.
Yes, I guess I should say the whole innocent until proven guilty and everything. But knowing what I know, I definitely believe they should be. I think it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As an outsider, like the position that your mom was put in, like, I don't think there should never be a situation where that never happens.
There should never. Pardon me for interrupting. There should never be a city as large as Toronto, where they had, I think they said something like 4,000 to 5,000 people reported missing a year. Most people it's resolved without it being a tragedy. But I think all of us were shocked to find out the hard way that there was no missing persons bureau in Toronto. But there was no special training. There was no system in place for this particular sort of event for adults. There's Amber Alerts and things in place for children, but for adults, you know, they seem a little bit less. It seemed like at the time that they were taking it far less seriously than, say, children.
As evidenced by the fact that it was Tess's loved ones that were the ones knocking on doors and searching in alleyways. And I know I imagine it's really hard to talk about, but one of the many tragedies that are in this story is the story of your mom finding Tess. Like, I know you can't talk for your mom, but what's it like? How did that play out from your point of view? Like, what do you know about that?
To be honest, I didn't know that was the case until like 2 days after I was back in the country. When my sister called me and said she's gone, it was panic. I started screaming, calling people, and they were booking me flights. They were getting me drivers to pick me up. The news was breaking. My phone was starting to go off. So I didn't really find out. I kind of just jumped on a plane. I had no phone access then for 8 hours till I got to Toronto. My sister picked me up at the airport. We got back to my other sister Rachel's house, and my mom had a bit of a medical episode, from the trauma. So I ended up going, because my sisters had been, with her for the last few days and whatnot. I was the one that went up to the hospital with my mom, and that's sort of how I found out. Like, she was getting treated by doctors, and my sisters were texting me, and then I realized that mom found her. So I didn't even know the details of that until there was just so much going on that I hadn't even really spoken to my mom. She was up in a bedroom, kind of medicated. She came out and kind of had a collapse, and we had to rush her up to the hospital. And so I didn't find out until, a couple of days, even though I was with the family. It was just chaos, I guess.
Yeah, and just so I understand it right, like, your mom doesn't live in Toronto. She came from North Bay.
She came from North Bay
to join the search.
Yeah.
Where is North Bay in relation to, like, is that a smaller, like, suburb, or where?
Yeah, it is. It's it's not a suburb. It's a small town or a smaller city. It's about, I'd say, roughly about 4 hours north of Toronto.
Wow. So from your mom's point of view, it's like she was going to the big city.
Well, she spent a lot of time with Tess in Scarborough at her apartment. They're very close. I can say this because this is what she said to me. But she said when she went to the apartment in Scarborough, like, we did a little trap at the door so that if she came home, we could tell that somebody had been in the apartment. And my mom said she didn't feel her there, but every time she went back to the neighborhood to look for her, she could feel something stronger, and that's how she eventually kind of found her. She feels like she just felt nothing over at the apartment in Scarborough, but when she was back downtown at the place where she was missing from, she said she felt like she could feel her. She felt like that's where she had to keep looking for her.
Wow. Now, after your mom had found Tess, it was very shortly after is when news came out that foul play was suspected, and they were, sharing the photos of her with the unknown male she was last seen with at that time.
Well, there was actually a 10-day period between that. Actually, we were told she died of misadventure. We were told. The coroner, we found out at trial, we thought that it came from the police, but actually it was the coroner who first ruled it was misadventure.
Oh,
so that was, no. And then we didn't believe that for a second, to be honest. Like, we did consider maybe, did she like go to the corner to try and pee and, fall down a stairwell and hit her head? We were trying to figure out, and I don't understand how a coroner can come to that conclusion based on her injuries. However, that is the case at first. And then it came out as a homicide. The news that the cause of death came out while I was in the hospital with my mom. So I had to wait till she got better before I broke the news to her that it was neck compression and that it was a homicide. Because at that point we were being told it was misadventure.
In misadventure would be, I fell off a set of stairs.
Yes, exactly. Like, basically an accidental death, like an unintentional, but, something that led to your death, basically. And so, again, it was chaos. And then we didn't get, like, nobody was designated a witness yet at this time. So we were kind of conducting our own investigation in a sense. Like, we were trying to figure out who or what happened. And so the surveillance photo only came out actually on December 10th. So we had about 10 days before any kind of lead from the police, like any kind of information that seems substantial.
Yeah. And were you or your family involved at all in the police investigation, or were you finding out? Oh, so you
not directly with them, but because we were desperate, we were sharing the photos. We were taking tips were coming through our social media.
Yeah.
So we were having to direct and take those tips and then and bring them to Detective Lumanis or Detective Gibson. So there was that. Then we would be told, there's a person that works in a particular shop near that area. Go. And so we'd go in and look and see if it looked like the person from the surveillance photo.
And you had because again, I've watched it play out from the public point of view, where a period of time went where the photo of the then person of interest was circulating. But
right.
Did during that time from the photo being released to them identifying him, was there activity where you were working to try to find him and following up leads, or were you
absolutely?
Yeah, okay. I kind of expected.
Yeah, we were going to the neighborhood. We were looking to see if the person was, we were thinking, how do serial killers work? Do they go back for trophies? Do they like to go back to the scene of the crime? Are they proud of their work? We were trying to, we were just anything we could think of. I think at one point before we got a photo, we were discussing, I think we were looking for a dark wig, and I was going to wear it and see if somebody was walking around the neighborhood looking drunk and see if anybody. Yeah, we were hunting. In the same way that we looked for Tess, we were looking for him.
Wow. Do you recall, do you remember the day that you found out he was identified? And did you know that had happened?
I remember when I found out there was an arrest, and they wouldn't give us his name until the next morning. Mm-hmm. Until the court, until he was being brought into the courts. So, the two questions I asked Detective Lumanis when he called us that night and said there was an arrest, it was just after the Super Bowl. I said, what is the charge? And he said, it's second degree. And I said, do we need to prepare ourselves for it being someone we know? And he said, no. So we didn't know what to expect other than what we had seen in the surveillance until we got in the courtroom the next day.
For the reading of the charges, is that what?
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, I guess an arraignment. That's a bit blurry, but because it was about 11:30 or so, I think, when they called us to say the arrest was made, and so obviously we were very wound up and unable to sleep and crying and scared to go into court the next day, but also determined to.
We were able to effect the arrest of the person responsible for Tess's murder.
Toronto police say 22-year-old Tess Richey was strangled to death in the village in November by a young man she met that very same evening.
They were together for some time, and that Mr. Schlatter left the area, and that by the time he left, Tess was already unfortunately deceased.
21-year-old Kalen Schlatter, a man with no previous criminal record, stands charged with second-degree murder. Police had released these surveillance photos of him and say they became aware of Schlatter early on in their investigation. The lead detective calls the murder a crime of opportunity.
The opportunity presented itself.
The cause of death, strangulation. It was November 25th when Tess Richey went missing after a night of partying with an old friend at Cruise and Tangos in the Church and Wellesley area. A snow-covered makeshift memorial still marks the spot where her body was found at the bottom of a stairwell, just doors away from where she was last seen. Her own mother was the one who found her there. Sister Varina Richey posted on Facebook, "This is not a celebration for us, but it is a victory of sorts, and we would now like to finally focus our energy and attention on honoring and remembering the best and zaniest little sister any of us Richey girls ever could have asked for."
At this point, when he was arrested and you found out he was arrested, did you have any kind of insider info as to what evidence they had against him, or were you waiting till trial?
No, we had to wait till trial. We didn't know that the reason for the upgrade to first degree was sexual assault. We prepared ourselves for it. We tried to research, what are the reasons for, what are criteria for first degree in the sense of, Canadian law. And there was 3 different, confinement, I think it was, sexual assault and premeditation. So we, prepared ourselves, but we were fairly, for the most part, we were in the dark about most.
Yeah, and I imagine that must, like, waiting for the trial to begin, for one, knowing that it's going to be, this much trauma going through the trial, like that, it must be hard to look forward to it in that respect, but also the fact that, like, I feel like if I was in your position, I'd be really anxious to get to the trial so I could learn what had happened. Like, was it,
Yeah.
like, what were your feelings waiting for the trial to come?
To be honest, at the beginning, we were gunning, when he was arrested, it was like, yeah, and by the time it took 2 years to kind of come to the trial, you've had to kind of imagine every possible scenario. And then you have to imagine like what could have happened to her down there, and what did he do, and why did he do it? Did he make faces? Did he tease her? Did he, tell her what he was going to do? Did he scare her? Was it fast? All those things. You have 2 years, nothing but time, and not a lot of information, and just the agony. So you just relive what you think might be her last minutes from every different angle. So you're kind of prepared, but it still doesn't prepare you to hear the word sexual assault and things like that.
When the trial eventually did come, a lot of what was written about it will bring up the fact that Tess had basically an army of supporters there, from friends, but especially so yourself, her mom, and the rest of your sisters. Like, can you talk about kind of the mood amongst your family and amongst Tessa's supporters actually showing up, like, on day one of this trial? Like, how did you feel, like, when the time actually came?
Honestly, I went to pre-trial. My mom and sister weren't able to because there were witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually had to keep a lot of information to myself right until the jury was in deliberation. That didn't go before the jury.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that was fairly difficult, but that's why I waited. I could do it, a few weeks. I couldn't have done it if I had have found out, because I was allowed to find out the information. But I knew that if I had it for 2 years, that would just be too hard on me. So I wanted to kind of find out as close to my family finding out at the same time as possible, if that makes sense. So there was that, but I mean, you can't hurt our girl and get away with it. And that's why the army of supporters, you're not going to get away with it. We're going to show you that she wasn't trash the way you left her, that she was loved, that she was somebody, that she meant everything to us. And I think that's what really a sort of defiance. We can't get our physical hands on you the way we want to, but we can show up and make sure and we can fill the courtroom when you were testifying and intimidate you and let that there's a strong force of love behind Tess and her life and her family.
Farah, in an opening address, the Crown told the jury this is the case of a young woman who was sexually assaulted and brutally strangled by a man she just met. The man charged, Kaylin Schlater, has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Crown Attorney Beverly Richards told jurors in her opening statement, the man who left his semen down the front of Tess Richey's pant leg and his saliva on the inside of Tess's bra was Kaylin Schlater. The man who murdered Tess by strangling her was Kaylin Schlater. Her family listened as the Crown described in detail how the accused killer bragged to 2 undercover police officers the night he was arrested. He told the officers that he loved brunettes, that he'd slept with over 40 girls, although he was only 21, the Crown said. Also, about the night he met Tess, how he wanted to have sex with her. She said no, and that made him upset. As the Crown laid out its case describing the sexual assault and strangulation of Tess Richey and how she fought back, her sisters wiped away tears. The case has sparked criticism against the Toronto Police Service for officers' failure to find Richey, and a review of how missing persons cases are handled is underway.
As far as facing him within the courtroom, I guess you would have been in court with him during some of the pretrial motions, but to be like, I just can't imagine the emotion of sitting there with the rest of your family and him basically sitting on the
Yeah, it makes me
stick.
sick. Yeah, it makes me sick. I'll be honest, there's not a lot of days that I missed, but there was a couple of days of trial that I missed simply because I woke up and I was in such a rage knowing that I'd be in the same room that I really didn't trust myself. Like I actually recognized that myself, that I didn't know that I couldn't not sit in the same room and not actually just try and hurt him. I'll be honest. Wow. So I had to show restraint and stay home, especially when it came to things like, the pathologist report. There's no way I could sit there and listen to a doctor describe the injuries on my sister while he sits there. I know I couldn't have kept my hands to myself, and I'm not that type of person at all. So yeah, it was very difficult. I'll tell you that, very difficult.
What about when the prosecution was presenting their case and basically showing their version of what happened that night and, the evidence to support it? Like, did you feel the story that they presented was an accurate reflection of what happened that night? And did you feel like when that was being presented against him that it was like kind of like a strong attack against him? Like, did you feel like you had the evidence?
The evidence, because we didn't know. We would find out every day at this kind of around when everyone else would find out. So it was hard to know. Mm-hmm. And with the UCs and the issues with that, there was it was convoluted at times.
What the UC? What is that?
The undercover officers.
Oh,
okay. UC1 and UC2, the
yeah.
UCs. So they didn't have judicial authorization to have audio tape.
Okay.
So they had to rely just on their statements.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know things that they had the undercover officers doing that. We didn't know these things. That these things had happened until the trial came about.
So you were hearing about this for the first time?
Yeah. So we weren't really sure about the strength of the case. We wanted to feel like it was strong. If it took them 8 weeks to upgrade it, it felt like they must have been working hard. They didn't just stop the investigation at the second-degree arrest. They kept working to fully uncover what they thought happened that night. And it does ring true what they have said, I guess. My sister was going through a heartbreak. She wasn't interested in Schlatter at all. She multiple times tried to go home. She'd had enough of the drink and she was tired, and as we all have done. And it was only in the closing statement that she said something about a shortcut theory, that the reason that my sister took his hand is she stood up at exactly the time on the surveillance camera as her phone pinged and she got the Uber alert. So she had every intention of going to catch the cab, and we believe he said, "Come here. I know a faster way to get behind that house." And so that's why, and she was wearing boots and there was that big gravel patch. So it does ring true that maybe that's how he got her hand and said, "Hold on, you're wearing heels, there's a gravel patch, I don't want you to fall. And come this way, there's a shortcut," and that's how he got her in the kind of cornered. So I do believe that's actually probably what happened when they said that in the closing, the shortcut bit. I do believe that's probably, that one actually didn't cross my mind, and all the times I was thinking of all the different theories, and that one didn't, but that one actually really rings true. I felt Bev and the Crown were very strong, but there were times where I didn't feel the evidence was.
Mm-hmm. What about one of the things that really surprised me was that his web search history was excluded from the trial. No, I don't know the
I
legal...
saw the evidence.
Yeah, because you knew
and
about
it was
this.
Horrific.
Mm-hmm.
No, I saw it in pre-trial. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't warned. And it was he most definitely acted out a little sick fantasy film. He had like a fake snuff film on his phone. And what's happened in the fake snuff film is almost identical. Almost like the alleyway with the garbage bins and the hitting in the head and it was almost identical.
So you were attending the hearing or whatever it was where they were deciding whether or not this could be used as evidence against him.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't expect it. They said they were going to play a pornographic video. So it was the first day. It was actually the first day, and it was like 4 p.m. So I expected maybe that kind of stuff would come up at pre-trial and even maybe on the first day, but I didn't expect quite what I had to sit through. It was pretty much like watching it happen.
What was when you found out that they weren't going to use that against him in the trial? Were you surprised?
I felt like, I was a little worried because I felt like that was a really damning piece of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a bit worried about that because I felt like, oh my God, like if he said something about it being inflammatory, and I was like, well, if you're a juror and you're going to be looking at, a young girl, her autopsy photos or her crime scene photos, you've got to be able to take all of it, right? So in the end, I understand why he did it, because that strikes out that chance of an appeal. That means the jurors found him guilty without the inflammatory evidence. But it's certainly, like it's not a nice side of law. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and I found it shocking. And you often will see a trial will go to deliberation or whatnot, and then there'll be an article that will come out like, this is what the jury didn't know, and they'll, and that's a common kind of article to come out. But this one in particular, when I read that, it's just like I wanted to scream, like, how could they not? Like, it seems like it's so relevant, but I guess the judge would have their reasons for, they probably know better.
Yeah, he said it was like far too inflammatory and prejudicial, I guess he said. That it was, he mentioned it in the sentencing, though. He said something like, you do have an appetite. I kept that from the jurors for a reason.
Yes, that's right.
So that they would convict you fairly and without, and he said, but it was your appetite for this violent pornography, because the judge was like, he was just as shocked, when it was played out. Like,
yeah. Now, when the point came that his defense was presented, I'm sure by this point you had your mind made up that he was responsible for killing your sister.
Mm-hmm. I always knew that.
What was it like to sit and listen, to see him sitting there and to hear someone basically giving a different version of the story that paints him as innocent? Like, what did that...
To be honest, there was enough surveillance photo of the alternate suspect, and I hate calling him that. He's actually become a friend, but I have to use that because his identity is protected.
Yeah.
He's actually sat with us every day during deliberations, waiting for a verdict to come in, because his life was kind of in the balance too. He wasn't ever being charged with this or investigated in any capacity related to this, but he didn't know that he was going to be painted as this alternate suspect. And I can just about handle that, with my background, that everyone has the right to a defense, and that defense lawyers are doing a job, and an important one at that. But it's one thing to defend somebody who's likely guilty, or whom you may suspect or know is guilty based on the evidence. It's another thing to totally drag an innocent person in order to do that. And it wasn't just like some other person did it and, an unknown. It was actually like they took somebody, a vulnerable person, targeted them, and did anything they could to save Schlatter's hide. And that was despicable. But again, if you can murder someone.
Yeah, it's not a big step.
Right, exactly. It's not a massive leap, is it? So.
In this alternate suspect, or whatever we want to refer to him as, my understanding is he was just someone who happened to be caught on video, like in that area.
Completely. He was out to see. He was a lonely guy, a nice guy, like not even lonely. Like it almost paints him as he's not anything but. He's a really charming, nice, kind person. But they tried to present him as like lonely, and maybe he was. He was living alone. He's single, and bars were coming out, and it could have made, I guess, a viable, reasonable doubt to the jurors, in the sense that they did produce a lot of surveillance photo where he's wandering around, and he has some communications with my sister, because she does kind of call him over. But that's, as you've noticed, we're kind of a talkative bunch. But at no time when he got off the witness stand, my mom went up to him and hugged him. I didn't see it, but she said, just so you know, not one member of my family think you did it. And he cried, and she cried, and we reassured him that, we were disgusted by this. We were not prepared for that either. We didn't know that was going to be the defense, shall we say.
We'll get into him taking the stand, and this must have been By him, I mean the accused.
Yeah.
This must have been, I say the accused, the guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that must be even a change to say that for you now. Because we're talking just like 2 weeks out from this happening.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's right. I was thinking he's not the accused anymore. I don't have to call him the defendant or the accused or, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's been proven in fact that this is the person who did this.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, it was, for lack of a better word, intriguing because we knew so little about this person who's done so much damage to our family and our lives, our Tessie. For 2 years, we knew nothing. He had wiped his socials. None of his friends were giving interviews to the press, or nobody was coming forward and saying, "Oh, I know him." Like it was really quiet. There wasn't anything out there. We had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So to actually, for the first time ever, hear his voice, to actually see his mannerisms, aside from the trial too, it was always very, very short appearances because we couldn't go to the bail hearings or the prelim. But yeah, it was, we wanted to hear his voice. We wanted to see what his mannerisms were. Who was this person that was the last person that our Tess ever spoke to or heard or saw? So there was, interest in the sense that, to finally hear him speaking or to see what he was going to say or how this was going to go. But when he was cross-examined by Bev, she was trapping him in his answers. Like the hatred was so obvious. Like he was seething, he was raging, and he just couldn't hide it. So yeah, whether that's the misogynist in him coming, like he had 2 female defense lawyers that he seemed, that he worked with and whatnot. But when Bev really trapped him, I mean, the hatred, it was like his eyes were glinty. They were like slits, little slats or something. They were like black. Wow. Almost. He wasn't opening his full eyes, like it was just this dead eye.
Can you think of any, was there any particular point of the cross-examination, like something they said to him or a corner they basically trapped him in that you really felt was like a kind of a turning point?
Well, it's the way Bev presented it. It was pretty amazing. I remember one point she was like, "Oh, and that was coincidence too, was it, Mr. Slatter?" And he was like, "Yes." And she's like, "Oh," and she'd turn around and she'd just she'd just laugh, so condescending, like, "You think we're stupid, do you?" And it was you could see it was enraging him, and she was just like, I mean, the gloves, she had been I knew she was a tough prosecutor, Crown, but with all her witnesses, she was quite gentle and,
But she was turning it on when she had the chance.
When she had him on the stand, I mean, it was pretty marvelous in a way.
Wow.
I walked out feeling like, I'm glad she's on our side.
Yeah.
Wow, that was uncomfortable even for me,
Yeah. Well, good. Well, that's what you want. Now,
absolutely.
And it was pretty much right after, because I'm guessing that among the whole trial, one of the more emotional parts would have been his time on the stand. But once he came off the stand, just before the closing arguments, it appeared that the trial was going to be derailed or delayed with the COVID-19 coronavirus. All the things that could happen, I'm sure you could never have imagined this. But tell me about that. When as the coronavirus started to spread and become a news story, do you remember the point where you're like, "Whoa, this may affect our trial"?
It was really, I think it was when somebody actually got a hold of me and said, the courts are sort of, I just didn't think that this sort of, I never expect, we've all been through H1N1, SARS, I never for 1 second thought the entire world was going to shut down, but I didn't think, and then when I actually started seeing courts being shut down and so then it all of a sudden became a big issue when it wasn't such a big issue for us at the time. We were so focused and absorbed on this trial. And then it became the COVID became too big for us to even ignore while dealing with the trial.
Wow.
I know many people are suffering with the COVID, not just with having the virus, but from the ripple effect of the work, of the jobs, of the kids being home, childcare, the future, the fear, how are we going to pay the bills? and I understand, like, I definitely don't want to take away from that, but I feel we were robbed a little bit, in the sense that because we couldn't have the courtroom full, there wasn't allowed to be more than 50 people, including the jury, and that very quickly, if you include even the court staff, they have to have like police officers and things like that. It's, we didn't get to fill it up with all her friends. They have kids, some of them. They didn't want, they were worried about leaving the house and coming back and bringing something to their kids. Like, out of everything, we couldn't imagine that a virus might have derailed the trial like this. So we were pleased that it was able to continue, but it also meant that we were forced to be out there. We had to kind of be exposed, be in a dirty, not that the courthouse is dirty, but yeah, there's a lot of people using it all day, elevators, the escalators and everything.
Yeah, dirty has a whole different meaning right now. Like, I'm pretty terrified to touch a tree or something.
Right, exactly. So, unfortunately, but we were really happy that the jurors were committed to seeing it through, because it was basically down to them. Yeah, so they thankfully went ahead with it and everyone was in agreement. So it just made it a lot, a murder trial a lot harder.
Watching the trial through the news articles and whatnot, like, I expected deliberations to be short and sweet for the jury, but it stretched on for, it really did. About a week, I guess, was it?
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite a week. It was like Friday was a lot of, the judge had to speak to them for like about 4 hours about different aspects of the charges, the evidence. So it was, that first part of the Friday, and then they went into deliberation until about 7. So I think they were finished being charged at about 2:00 or something. So they had lunch, they did a couple hours of deliberation, and we thought, okay, that's normal. And we thought, okay, hopefully Saturday, like, it's, there's not multiple victims, it's not 2 accused or somebody who did, it should be fairly straightforward, we were hoping, but, we don't know what went on in there. Maybe it was straightforward, but they just wanted to make sure they went over everything thoroughly. It's a big responsibility.
Oh, definitely. And,
I don't envy them in any way.
And as it stretched on, like, were you getting worried? Like, did you think maybe this isn't going to go our way?
I always felt that way. Like, not felt that way, but there was always that, from the beginning of this whole thing, there's always been that uncertainty. So it was never for me like a done deal, even though I knew what was kept from them, jurors, and I knew that, it was a complicated trial and there was a lot of evidence to go over. And so, I was starting to worry. We started to have a pep talk about like what would we do if it was a not guilty.
Oh.
Yeah.
What did you decide?
Well, we were just talking about like we weren't going to yell or shout anything. We were going to hold our heads high. We were going to walk out. So we were trying to brace ourselves and try and talk ourselves up about what we would have to do and how to maintain our emotions and our feelings about this person. What we know that he did, but we know that trial, that's the whole thing of a trial. It could go any way. The jurors are, it's unpredictable.
The jury has been in deliberation since Friday, and late today, they came back with their verdict.
Tess got her justice.
Words from Tess Richey's mother following the guilty verdict. But even though there's a small sense of relief,
we'll never be happy, we'll never be complete again. But we can try to heal from here and do things in Tessie's name.
Hearing the verdict today, Richey's mother says she was at a loss for words.
I was shocked because I have to admit I didn't expect murder in the first degree. I wanted it, I hoped for it, I prayed for it, but you just don't know how these things can play out.
The court heard Richey was out with friends on the night she disappeared. At one point during the trial, the jury watched video that showed Schlater leading Richey to an alley around 4 a.m. Schlater had pleaded not guilty, testifying that Richey was alive when he left her in an alley following what he says was a consensual sexual encounter.
Unfortunately, Tess was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
The detective sergeant sending a special thank you to the jury.
Okay, Kalen Schlater is a predator. He's a murderer. And I want the jury to know, again, that they made the right decision and justice was served.
And on the day Richey's family celebrates a small victory, they want people to remember who Richey was.
She was the kindest, sweetest little girl, and she would take your hand and she'd walk down the street with you. She never hurt a soul, and she was a mama's girl. She was my best friend, my baby. We all lost when we lost Tess.
Now, a sentencing hearing will be held here at the University Courthouse on Wednesday at 10 a.m. But I should mention that this conviction holds a mandatory life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years.
When the verdict did come in, and you found, and it was the way you wanted it to be, with him being found guilty, I know there was like celebration, but did you feel like, was there any change in your grief knowing that Tess would get justice and that he was no longer the accused or the suspect, but he did it? Like, did you feel a change come over you when you heard the verdict?
No, honestly, no. I just felt, if anything, a deeper sadness. Like, there's the big fight that was keeping us going, that we had to kind of keep us going, that we were focused and motivated on, suddenly just ended. I mean, completely, like with the sentencing being so quick too. It was just, all of a sudden, it was just grief. All we were left with was two families whose lives are in tatters and two 20-somethings, totally no futures anymore. And regardless, like, it's not that I feel bad for him, but it's just, I don't understand how, somebody does something like this, how this has affected, like it just seemed like, again, I put on Facebook that there was just no winners, that there's no winners in this. It's the right result. So it's a relief that he can't hurt anybody ever again. But it's, I don't feel peace. I don't feel closure. I don't feel anything but maybe a bit of relief and deep, deep, deep grief and sadness. Like, now we're just left with that sort of, we have other fights, like there's, the misconduct things and stuff coming up, but really this was obviously the big one that related to what actually happened to my sister.
Mm-hmm. But I guess I never thought about the way that having this trial ahead of you was always like a goal you were working towards.
Yeah.
But now that it's behind you, you're just kind of left with, we lost Tess.
Yes, exactly. And then, again, with the added, I don't mean to be, self-pity, but the added, I can't travel home. I can't, I can't go out. I can't go get groceries. I'm already trying to make it work in Canada as it is. And then I had to come into Toronto, relocate for the trial. So it's already been like, I'm already kind of living a temporary place, going to another temporary place and trying back to my more permanent temporary place. It's just, it's kind of left me with like everything just went away all of a sudden at once. I don't get to see my mom every day now like I did. There was that kind of thing. My sisters were there every day, and we had the support of Bev and all of them, and now it's sort of like we're just at home. You just, the grief is all you focus on, and then you can't even do anything about it to make yourself feel better because nobody can come out and see you. You can't go in anybody's house. I have to be in quarantine because I was one of the people that was out there. So I have to make sure that I'm not making anybody sick. But, isolating yourself after a murder trial is very unhealthy.
Now, so with the trial and the sentencing behind you, like, what will come next for your family as far as like keeping Tess as a part of your life and, keeping her memory, a big part of you? Like, how do you, I know it's only been a few weeks since the trial ended, but how do you see that happening in the future?
I don't actually know. You're right. It's a lot to take in. I just know that this is every family's worst nightmare. Really, truly, it is. There's no worse nightmare. That's what you worry. You worry some bad person's going to hurt the person you love. And somebody's going to reach into your family and take the heart out of it effectively. You see on the news, these families, we're to become that family, to actually I don't even know what to say. It's just, yeah, I'm I'm actually kind of at a loss for this one. It's kind of hard to.
Yeah, and I do know it was something that this kind of side of life was something Tess even spoke about publicly. Like I'm sure you know the YouTube video that
Yes.
she published,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
it's just I find that kind of just a strange coincidence that kind of still exists. That video.
Yeah, I know of it. I haven't watched it because I actually have a lot of things I haven't looked or watched or done because I'm scared to almost go through the limited things we have left of her. Yeah, like those videos, I'm glad that she did them. I'm glad that, but they do make me sad knowing that they're about, having a bad boyfriend. In such a short life, she did seem to meet a lot of bad people, or people. I won't group these men into a group with murder. Obviously not, but she did seem to kind of have bad luck from boyfriend to boyfriend, and then they go out and get over a boyfriend and somehow fall into the sight line of a killer is just tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy with her. Like, it's just so sad.
Yeah, and I don't know if you spent much time thinking about this, but as far as like her killer now is going to spend a good amount of his life behind bars, like, do you think as far as like rehabilitation, like do you believe in that? And do you
No.
think there's any, like, I know
I do not at this point, not for this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think you can hold somebody's airway as they fight for their life and then not care for 5 days while their family's frantic and to pin, it's just, I don't need to put it on another innocent person. That can't be rehabilitated. That's not a person who's sorry. That's not a person who feels sorry. They feel sorry for themselves. No, I believe in a lot of cases that sentencing, that prison sentences should be rehabilitative. But I've always even before Tess, I've always felt like murder is it's something you can't ever replace or undo. So it's not something you rehabilitate from. Mm-hmm. It's just there's something broken in you to do that to someone that you can't fix.
I saw a short interview with your mom that was, I think, on the news maybe just last week, where she compared him to a young Paul Bernardo, and I can see that.
I can see that too. He certainly. When we were looking for him, there was things like people were able to identify the label of his jacket and find out that it was a very expensive jacket. When he showed up, when he was arrested, when he was arraigned, or whatever it is called, in court the morning after he was arrested, he was wearing very nice clothing. So he was very much somebody who clearly took pride in their clothing and their appearance. And Paul Bernardo was very good looking. He was sort of charming. I don't know if Slatter was charming. I know that from accounts from Bernardo that, he was, but I've only seen him on the stand and he was raging, as Bev kind of tore him apart. So I don't know if he's charming. He didn't come across to me that. I think he was also stupider, more stupid rather than Paul Bernardo. Paul Bernardo was more progressive, it seemed. He started with like rapes, I believe. He was he was a Scarborough rapist or something. He was it was bizarre too. He was, Slatter was sentenced in the same courtroom as Bernardo was 25 years ago. So that was bizarre, being afraid of that case when I was a teenager to being almost a part of that story, a piece of that story, knowing what their families, I looked at a picture. He applied for parole last year or in 2018. And I looked at a picture of the families. There is no way. I looked at them. And with all due respect, if they're listening or they hear this, they did not recover. They did not heal. Time did not do its thing. You can see the pain etched into their faces. And I know that's our future. I see them. There's just that look that I know that I know well now, and I know that it won't go away on us either. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I want to end on not talking on him, but try to end on a positive note. Now, for people who are listening that are drawn to Tess and are feeling for you and your family, like what can people out there to do to support you or to honor Tess? Like what can we learn from this, or what good can come of this?
You know what? That's a really good, to everyone, the community. I mean, my friends from childhood, my old employers, previous employers, everyone. I mean, I've been on my knees. I came back to Canada. I didn't have health care. I didn't have residency. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a home. I didn't have a winter jacket. I'll be honest, I actually got on the plane. I didn't even have a bra on. I didn't realize I didn't pack one. A friend had to loan me one. Because I was in such a state when I got the news that Tess was found and she was gone, that packing, So all I can just say is thank you to everyone who has done that. And if you are a person in a position to help someone, do it. It can make a whole difference on whether or not they choose to try and at least keep going a little bit, or they choose to, go a dark route, a very dark route. So that's what I could say. If you see somebody in need, if they ask for a ride on Facebook to go get some groceries, or they need, a ride to a doctor's appointment, or they need whatever it is, a place to stay at in Toronto for the night while you're going to court, or a meal, gas, a ride, whatever. It's, yeah, that's what I would say. If you see someone in need and they're asking, you'll never know. Maybe, I know I've said thank you a million times, and maybe I've said thank you to the point where it almost lost meaning, but perfect strangers have opened their doors to me, like friends' moms that have never, friends' parents that have never met me and things like that. It's just the generosity of the community that I'm surrounded by, or that I've built, both of them. It's just been incredible. So whether they did it for me or they did it for Tess, I don't know, but we're both, I'm sure I can speak for her and say we're both really grateful. Yeah. Make most of the time with your family. It's really cliched, but it's the truth. You don't know, you're not promised tomorrow, and you never know. You never know when just suddenly, just like that, the whole world changes.
I want to thank you for joining Varina and I in this discussion that was simply heartbreaking. If evil does exist in this world, it showed its face in this horrific story. The inspiring and young Tess had her life cut way too short, and the loved ones she left behind, like Varina and the rest of the Richey women, will certainly never be the same. But as Varina said, maybe some good can be squeezed out of this. Perhaps in the form of systemic improvements in the police handling of missing persons cases. Or it could be something as simple as her words reminding us to spend time with family and inspiring us to help out someone in need. Varina and the Richey family, my sincere condolences on the loss of your Tessie. And with that, we'll end this episode of Nighttime. But before we part, I'd like to end with some thanks. First, a huge thank you to Varina Richey for bravely sharing your family's story with us. Varina, I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud to call you my friend. And in addition to Varina, I'd like to thank the Canadian bands Vox Somnia and Paragon Cause for providing this episode's musical themes. And lastly, a huge thank you to everyone listening to Nighttime. Without you, this show would have seen the light of day many moons ago. If you want to help keep the lights out at nighttime, let me suggest the premium feed. For about the price of a cup of coffee, you can access a separate feed where the episodes are posted earlier than the free feed, and done so without paid advertising. But just beyond the regular episodes, the premium feed also includes the Nightcap After Show episodes, in which I and a guest climb a bit deeper down the rabbit hole. And with that said, I want to thank the newest subscribers to that premium feed, David L. and Shauna. Thank you both for your generous support. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show but can't help financially, you can give me a big hand by simply telling your friends about me and leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts or any equivalent you use. If any of you listening want to stay up to date with my activities on or off the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I use the handle @NighttimePod. And of course, if you have any story ideas or would like to give feedback on the show, I'd love to hear from you at nighttimepodcast@gmail.com. Now, until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and stay safe out there.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte. Copyright Jordan Bonaparte.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like the public, wouldn't realize the ripple effects that come from a crime like this. I'm sure your whole family have their lives derailed.
This one person, so full of evil and anger and hate, has not only been nothing but a terrible weight on the system and on society, but he took away 6 really, contributing members of society with a lot of potential. All ripped away, all gone.